Good afternoon. I'd like to welcome you to our webinar today, The Funnel Effect Tips to Successfully Navigate the Bottleneck in Housing and Residence Life. Today's webinar is sponsored by the Glukuho Professional Foundations Committee. My name is Jeremy Alexander, and I am the Technology Coordinator for Glukuho, and I'm serving from Eastern Illinois University. I'll serve as today's webinar moderator. Before we get beginning with today's webinar, there are a few housekeeping items I'd like to get with you to maximize today's webinar's experience. To ask questions, look at the question and answer section down at the bottom of your screen. This way we can ask the panelists any question and we'll get back to you as quick as possible. Should you experience any problems with today's webinar signing or any kind of audio issues, type in the chat box and I'll work with you. At the end of today's webinar, we will host this on the Glukuho website at glukuho.org, and you can share this also with any of your other professionals. I'd like to hand it over to our Professional Foundations Committee to get us started today with the webinar. Vika?
Hey everybody, my name is Vika Bell Robinson and I am the Director of Residence Life at Miami University. And I want to thank you for attending today's webinar, The Funnel Effect, Navigating the Bottleneck in Housing and Residence Life. So our time together is pretty straightforward. We'll talk a little bit about the importance of the topic. I'll have the panelists introduce themselves. I have questions that the panelists received ahead of time that they'll respond to. We'll have an opportunity for you as audience members to ask any questions. You can put those questions in the question box that Jeremy spoke about earlier, and then we'll have final thoughts from the panel. So just as a note of the importance of this topic, we know that there are a lot of entry-level professionals that enter the field of housing and residence life. If you attend TPE, if you look at higheredjobs.com, there are just a plethora of entry-level residence life professional positions. We know that as the professional gets older, so as we proceed in our field, the opportunities to move up and through housing and residence life become limited. And so we thought from the Glukuho Professionals Foundation Committee that this would be a neat topic for you all to hear about and for you to hear about the experiences of current senior housing professionals within the region of Glukuho. So I'll let the professionals start to introduce themselves. We'll go in order of the slide. So Chris, if you could start by providing a brief introduction of yourself, including how you got to your current role.
Sure. Hi, everybody. My name is Chris Beyer. I'm the Director of Residential Life at Augustana College. I've been at Augustana for 5 years. Just quickly running through how I got here. It started at Drake University in Iowa. I was an RA there. When I went to grad school, I attended Eastern Michigan University, and I worked as an assistant hall director at EMU for 3 years. I got my first professional position at the University of Michigan. I served there for 3 years before returning to Eastern Michigan as an area complex director. It was a job that had a little bit more responsibility than the hall director job at U of M. From there, I stayed there for just 1 year before I moved to Cleveland, Ohio, and worked at Case Western Reserve University as the upper class manager. So I essentially went from a job supervising RAs to a job where I had a larger group of RAs and a grad student to a job where I had a team of grad students. And for me, they were all live-in positions, but they were positions of increasing responsibility each time. I stayed at Case Western for 2.5 years before I was promoted to assistant director, and that was when I moved off at 32 years old. And I stayed there another 1.5 years longer as the assistant director before I started looking around and found this position at Augustana. So in 2015, I applied and was hired here as the director.
Thanks, Chris.
Hi.
Go ahead, Jasmine.
Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Jasmine Clay. I serve as the Director of Residence Education for undergraduate housing at the University of Michigan. I, similar to Chris, was RA in undergrad, attended a small private liberal arts institution, was very involved as a student leader, loved my time as an RA, was a senior RA, then went to grad school at Indiana State University. I served in a live-in hall director role at 2 different Big Ten institutions before moving to an assistant director position, working with a residential college. And so at that point, I moved to the College of Letters and Science at the University of Wisconsin-Madison and was more on the academic side of work within the residential environment. I then came to the University of Michigan in July of 2015 in an associate director's position and moved to a director position in August of 2016.
Liz, you can go ahead.
Hi, everybody. I'm Liz Gordon-Canlis. I'm the Director of Residence Life and Housing at the Columbus College of Art and Design in Columbus, Ohio. I was also an RA in undergrad. I went to Wright State University, which was a commuter campus in Dayton, Ohio. It had a small residential population. And I went on to graduate school at Ohio University and was a resident director there while I did my graduate program. My first full-time position was under the amazing leadership of Dr. Vicabelle Robinson at Miami University. I was there just shy of 2 years before I moved back to Columbus, my hometown, to work at Ohio State as a hall director, and was a hall director for 3 years before I became an assistant director of residence life, which I served in for 4 years, and left this past June to be the director of residence life and housing at CCAD, which is a small private arts college in downtown Columbus, Ohio.
Thank you, Liz. Go ahead, Amanda.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Amanda Kinner, and I currently serve as the Executive Director for Residential Life at Indiana State University. Like many of the other panelists, I started out as an RA and then as an Assistant Hall Director at Wittenberg University as an undergrad student. I took a couple years off then and taught high school students with severe and profound disabilities at Marian Aronson High School in New Orleans as part of the Teach for America program. I went back to Ball State to do my master's there, and then when I graduated, I moved up to the University of Alaska Southeast and ran their housing program for just shy of 3 years, and then wanted to move closer to family. And so I took a job at Penn State, the Barron's College, and I was Associate Director for Student Affairs there. So I did a little bit beyond residential life. I did conduct and senior year experience, freshman interest groups, alcohol prevention programming, counseling, some of those sorts of things. And after a few years there, 3 years, I moved to Penn State University Park campus as a Senior Associate Director. And in that role, I had responsibilities of the main campus with about 14,000 students, but I also was responsible for 9 campuses away from University Park and their residential life program. When I finished my doctoral work, decided it was time to move to a senior director position, and ended up here about 7 years ago at Indiana State University.
Wow, what a variety of different paths to the current positions that you all hold. Thank you so much for sharing that information. So we'll go on to the next question. We already did that one, so I'm skipping. Okay, so the next question, when did you decide that you wanted to pursue a senior housing position? Let's, Jasmine, if you could answer this question, and Liz.
Have to unmute myself. This is Jasmine. So I was taking notes for these questions, and this is the one that was the hardest for me because I can't actually say that it was an intentional pursuit. I think that I am someone who paid attention to what my next step was when I realized I got to a point where I was ready for something new and didn't want to be stagnant in a role. And I realized that each step along the way that it was time for me to do something else because I felt like I maybe could do things in my sleep, so to say, is what people say. And at those points in my career, it was time for me to really try to take a moment to evaluate what next steps may be for me. And so I think when I talk with people about their careers, sometimes folks are told to think 10 steps ahead. I always say, like, let's focus on what the next step may be because you don't necessarily know where your path may end up. And I shared earlier that for my specific path that I moved to the College of Letters and Sciences for a moment in my career. And for me, that was really impactful because it helped prepare me for a senior level leadership role because I was working with academic partners. And so to be able to view this work from the academic lens now helps me as I work with my academic partners on campus.
This is Liz. This is also a tough question. I don't know that I'm sure when I was a graduate student at OU and Judy Piercy was the director of residence life at Ohio University, I deeply admired her and her leadership and thought that she made vision setting and strategy look like this really creative and exciting opportunity. But I think over the years, I probably was a little bit more blurry about what I wanted my next step to be. I think what really clarified the pursuit of this position for me was identifying really what I like to do for work and moving away from the fear of losing the connection with students and really reimagining the work that if I can learn to support students, I can still stay connected with them in any way. And you really have to learn that at a big place like Ohio State when you may not be seeing or knowing as many students, even though there are 54,000 students around you every single day. What I really picked up was I liked vision setting and I liked strategy development. I liked policy. I liked making decisions around crisis. Some of us may be making some decisions right now around our response to a national public health concern. And I felt confident in my decision making the more that I was working at the mid-level. And what really helped me find those things was a professional development opportunity that I took outside of residence life that I can talk about later in the webinar, but it helped me realize that there were these other skill sets that I could develop that would make work in housing more rewarding. And that kind of lined up with me thinking like, okay, I think I'd like to keep doing this work, but maybe at a different institutional type, maybe at a different institution that wasn't, had a newer student affairs operation. So that's kind of how I landed at CCAD.
Great, thank you both. Chris or Amanda, do you have anything you'd like to add?
I can chime in just because my account's a little different. I can remember pretty specifically, it was 2011 when I decided I wanted to make this a career. My first master's was in historic preservation, so this wasn't even really on my radar early on. But in 2011, I attended PDI, I attended the National Housing Training Institute, and I finished a second master's degree in student affairs. And I think all three of those experiences really kind of opened my eyes to how kind of rich and rewarding this could be as a career field.
Great, thank you. Amanda, anything you'd like to add?
No, I'm okay for now.
Okay, great, thank you.
We did have a question about how important was location throughout your career journey?
Location, y'all want to chime in on that?
Sure, I can chime in. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I intentionally tried to leave location pretty open. When I first entered this field, I had just been married, but with no kids, and so there was an opportunity, there weren't routes, so I was able to travel wherever the job would take me. And so I intentionally tried to look for positions that were in different parts of the country to learn how higher ed worked in those areas and just to get to explore and experience life in different places.
Thanks, Amanda. Jasmine, were you gonna say something?
Oh, it was Liz.
Oh, go ahead, Liz.
Sure. I am married and have two children. They're pretty little, 19 months, and one that my oldest just turned 5. But when I started looking at this job at CCAD, we were also looking at other opportunities that were not in Ohio. And our parents live here in Central Ohio, but I say this to put out the message that I felt like when I started job searching, I had to let people selectively know, like, please don't count me out because I have these 2 children and a husband and we're here in Columbus where I grew up, that we're open to starting a new chapter. We were at a really critical age because my son starts kindergarten in the fall. So we were really open to making any type of move to another big urban center, if the opportunity presented itself. Now, certainly, there was an ease in the transition. I think about the past 9 months of being here, and I wonder, oh my goodness, what would this have been like if I were learning to navigate a new city, or if I had to find a new pediatrician, or a new place of worship, or a new place to get my hair done. That's a whole other topic. You know, so I'm happy that I could avoid those challenges in this new job transition, but it was something that we considered, you know, location, but probably from a different perspective than maybe people consider.
Okay, great. We're gonna go to the next question. And then for this question, Amanda and Chris, if you could take this question, and then Jasmine and Liz, you'll be invited to add commentary. So where should you have spent more time as an entry-level professional, to be better prepared for today?
Oh, I struggled with this one a little bit. I think for me, the two areas I would have probably spent more time is really getting an understanding of facilities management, and not just how to check out or do recore and work orders and that sort of thing, but really understanding what is the difference between a 4-pipe and a 2-pipe system. How do you do master planning? How do you engage or learn with tradespeople so that you can have an intelligent conversation when you're sitting around the room designing a new building and when you're making decisions that impact a building. I would have probably spent more time learning those sorts of skills and asking questions, reading up on it. And then the other piece for me would probably be around enrollment management and how that ties directly into occupancy management. Going and having lunch or coffee breaks with individuals who do enrollment management work and really learning about what it takes to develop and cultivate a relationship with a high school student all the way through matriculation, through graduation, and then to help them be an engaged alumni. I spend a lot of my time right now in our strategic enrollment management team and doing that work. I would say some weeks it's over 10 hours a week working on enrollment management stuff. So more knowledge and skills there would have been helpful.
Great, thank you, Amanda.
My answer is similar. I think in my current position, I probably spend more of my time interfacing with people outside of my department than actually doing, typical res life work. And that includes colleagues in other areas of the campus and also a whole list of vendors who provide different services to our community. So I think as a young professional, I would have been better served if I had just spent more time getting to know the work of other departments, because now it's important to me to be able to work with academic administrators and colleagues in counseling and police and public safety and facility services. I mean, these are the people I'm emailing regularly, and to understand their perspective and their work and the things that are important to them, the pressures they're under. I'm better able to do my job by having more insight into their job.
Great, thank you.
I would just add that I think it speaks to what Amanda and Chris said, is really taking time to pause, reflect, and think about the big picture. When I think about myself as an entry-level professional, I spent a lot of time focusing on my specific job and my specific community, and was not always able to pay attention to what may be other factors around decision-making. And those are conversations that I have with my staff a lot now in terms of helping them think about what their next steps are, and if they are thinking through the lens of their next steps as opposed to thinking through based on the position that they are currently serving in.
Great, that's good. Liz, anything?
No, I'm good. I agree with all the points made.
Great, thank you. For this next question, Chris and Jasmine, if you could answer this next question. What is one task that you completed as a mid-level professional that you continue to do today?
I still do many of the same tasks, just I have a slightly different scale, I guess. The biggest one is I still supervise, and supervision feels like it hasn't really changed a lot from the time I was supervising RAs. Still have one-on-one meetings, still lead staff meetings. That feels pretty similar. I still serve on call at a different level now. I still do conduct meetings. Sometimes I still get involved in roommate conflicts, though I try to not do that too quickly if there's others who can do it. I think what's changed is now I have a greater time horizon. You know, I'm not planning a month or two in advance. I'm always thinking a year or two in advance, or, you know, where are we heading down the road. Just taking a much bigger picture approach, but many of the tasks are essentially similar tasks.
I wrote down the same thing on my notes. The only piece that I would add that is a conversation that I have with my staff quite a bit is helping parents and families navigate what it means to have a student who is here and who be able to provide the student with agency on determining their own path. And so I receive, based on the way our website is set up, parents don't always call the hall director. They will immediately jump to me. And so being able to listen and then work with my staff on how do they directly work with the student around some of their needs as a and helping the parent be able to have some of those conversations about providing the student with some agency for their experience.
Thank you both. Liz or Amanda, anything to add?
I think one thing that I've tried to do is continue to do that mentorship. I don't directly supervise graduate students or new professionals anymore, but I really try to make it a priority to meet with every member of my team at least once a semester, even if it's just briefly or lunch or coffee, because I think it's important to learn a little bit about their experience and to understand their perspective, but also so that they feel comfortable just walking in my door and having a conversation, asking questions, giving feedback, sharing ideas. So that's something that I've tried to maintain as I've moved up.
Great.
Becca, I think one of the things I remember being really challenging for me as a mid-level professional was that mid-level management, the reporting up and reporting down and all around. And I think at many times wondering, like, when will this experience serve me, or will it always feel this tough and challenging? And certainly from the position I'm in now, I have to use that skill in a different way. It feels a little bit more like the chance to advocate for staff and for students, and I have more of an involvement in the decision making. But there's still somebody, you know, that needs to know why certain decisions are being made or why funds are being requested, and then, you know, there's still messaging that has to go out to the students and the staff who are impacted by those decisions. So doing the same thing and seeing it differently between mid-level and the work I do today.
Yeah. Yeah, the middle just moves, right? Like, it's not that, you know, it's not like, okay, I'm an assistant director or coordinator or an associate director, and now I'm a director, and so now I don't have the middle, but you become the middle between the, you know, the divisional leadership or whoever your supervisor is, and then those folks that you're working for. The middle definitely moves. So I'm being able to manage that and expect to continue that throughout. And if you think about it, even our presidents or whatever the senior leadership is of your campus is reporting to a board of regents or the state or the board of trustees, as well as their cabinet. So the middle, managing the middle is certainly something that sticks with us throughout our career. Okay, next question. I'll ask Liz and Amanda to take this one first. How has your career impacted your personal life and family obligations? And then, of course, Jasmine and Chris, you feel free to add.
Yeah, so I was so excited to see this question, Becca. You know why? So now I have to put Becca out in the spotlight for a little bit. So when I was a new professional working at Miami, I actually didn't meet Becca during my on campus because she had been out on maternity leave. And I was really excited to have the chance to see higher level staff that were navigating those family obligations. And I really started to kind of lay that groundwork very early in my career as far as what I saw about other professionals that I thought was going to be critical to me as I got married and had children. And certainly the past 9 months in this new role have impacted our family significantly. And my husband has, you know, really had to manage some nights, way more evening commitments than I had as an assistant director. And it sometimes feels like more than I had as a hall director, just as I make the transition and get to know campus more. But I'm grateful to have a framework from Ohio State that has really encouraged me to navigate and negotiate those things. So when I had my children at OSU, I was able to bring both of them to work when they were infants every day. They slept in the pack and play in my office and came to meetings and strolled around campus in the baby carrier. So I've always carried a philosophy with me that I have to really advocate for my family and try to find ways that are appropriate and safe to kind of weave them into my professional life. And certainly being at a smaller college setting has meant that we've had a chance to do that really easily. And so tonight, for example, I'm working late because our housing assignments are we're in the midst of that, and so I'll have dinner with my family in our dining hall, and then they will go home, and I will head back to the office to kind of keep on top of those admin tasks. But it's really meant that we've had to be thoughtful about our time spent together and about just communicating all of the different work commitments and then entering into this new chapter of having school-age children, which I know it has a whole different set of expectations and needs than having little children who are in childcare. But I feel like my family is my biggest motivation. I see students in a really different and compassionate light through my motherhood, and so it's been a really fulfilling part of my work, and I'm really grateful to have it to be able to kind of steer myself as a professional, through the eyes and thought of my family.
Great, thank you. Amanda?
Sure. I echo a lot of what was already said. I've have 4 kids. We joke I have an arrival, a Thanksgiving, a spring break, and a closing baby over the time in my career. And I've really tried to take the approach that to integrate my family and my professional life. I think it gives my kids an opportunity to really see what life on college is like and how much I value learning, lifelong learning, and why college is an important step for them. I also think it helps my team and my students to see what a family looks like, what it looks like to be balanced. That being said, it isn't always perfect. There are many nights where I sit here late because an emergency happened, and I think, 20 years from now, my kid's gonna look back and say I'm not there enough. And then there are other times where I walk out at the end of the day and think I really need to be here doing this event this evening or something else. But my kid has an event, and I want to make sure that I'm there for that. And will my team look like feel like I'm dropping the ball or letting things down? So it's a constant struggle, and it's a constant. What is balance going to look like for me, and how are we going to do this in a way that makes sense? And being okay knowing that I'm not always going to be the perfect professional all the time. I'm also not always going to be the perfect parent all the time. And sometimes one needs to take a higher priority than the other. There isn't this perfect balance in life, and there isn't this perfect balance in your career. And a lot of times you're winging it and doing the best that you can. But I was really fortunate in that, my team and my supervisors, when I was a young parent, really allowed my family to participate and to come and sometimes be in the office because I didn't have a babysitter when they were sick, or allowed them to come to an evening event because I couldn't have managed it any other way. And so I've tried to set the same stage with my team too. Family is important, and it's important for if we aren't feeling like our family's good, we can't take care of our work. And so making sure that we can really do both and do both well has been a priority.
Great, thank you so much. Jasmine or Chris, anything to add?
I echo a lot. I think the only thing that I would add is that I have 2 young kids as well, and I think that being a parent has helped me to be more strategic with my time in ways that I was not earlier in my career.
Sure.
Because it's really made me evaluate if this is something that I need to be doing. And I have a type A personality, so in my mind, most things I should be doing. And it's made me evaluate that and be able to figure out who are the other professionals that are here to support me in my work, and what can be an administrative professional, what can be assistant directors, and that everything doesn't need to be me.
Great.
And maybe I'll add, I have 4 kids also, and our youngest actually is a foster child, and we're in the process of adopting. And I'm sharing that because it was a goal we had for a long time, but didn't actually want to try it until we felt like we were in a place that we were stable and could stay long term. And to me, that's part of what's different about being an SHO now. Every other job I had until this point, I sort of imagined to be a 3 to 5 year gig. But when it came time to apply for a job like this, I knew I was really looking for a long-term commitment, primarily because I wanted a place where we could buy a house and raise our kids and settle down and kind of go into this foster care journey. So, kind of the family situation was a major factor in just finding the institution and finding the city and settling into a role like this.
Great. Thank you all. Okay, for this next question, let's hear from everyone briefly. What was the most surprising part of your transition to a senior housing officer position? Well, let's start with the newest, Liz. I'm going to put you on the spot. You're the newest SHO. What's been most surprising so far?
Yeah, I think, well, the most surprising part has been just how much over the years I separate, or rather didn't separate, residence life and housing. That I had a career full of residence life and residential education work and zero housing operations, business operations. And man, that has really been a challenge the past few months, and I've been learning a lot. And I think what surprised me most about that challenge, though, is how quick people were to support me, to call. And Tony Greenslade-Smith, who is the director of housing at Ohio State, has emailed me and called me and walked me through my housing selection process and how to play the Tetris game. We're way over occupancy at my college, and so trying to find housing solutions for students who are mostly out of state and have no interest in living off campus has been something that I've been trying to address. So I would say that the parts of the job that I knew and had expressed, like, hey, this is a part of the role I haven't had a lot of experience. I know that these are my really strong skill sets. I know that I'm a strong learner. I advocate well. I can make connections, and relationship building is something that's critical to me, but I'm going to have to have some support in figuring out how to do this. And so I've just been so pleasantly surprised and so gracious by, our professional organizations. And, I'm right next door to the Akuhuai central office. So, our friends at Akuhuai just checking in and people offering that help. And, it's certainly mentorship and support that I will certainly, pay forward to others when they're making a big transition as well.
Thanks. Whoever would like to go next.
I can go. I think for me, I was not prepared for the burden or responsibility, I guess is the best way to say that. How many nights I would leave work and just be worried about particular situations, whether it be about, am I making the right decision, about a financial planning opportunity that we had. Did I respond to that team member the right way? Did I shut that conversation down? Am I setting the right vision for the team? Was I representing our department the right way? But also just that care and burden for my team and for our students, and seeing some of the ways in which people were struggling or having a bad day, and how often I would go home and worry about them, and how often I'd go home and do a quick, hey, just checking in on you text. I wasn't prepared. Every other position I had, I could call my boss and dump it on them and then walk away and leave it alone. And suddenly there was nobody else to dump it on. It was all on my shoulders. And so just trying to figure out how to best to deal with that responsibility and that burden and wanting to do right by my team members.
Great. Thanks, Amanda.
This is Jasmine. I would definitely ditto what has already been shared, especially the pieces around the accountability with staff. And so for me, it's been those pieces around the balance of having critical conversations and difficult conversations to help people be better professionals, knowing that they will go somewhere else and use their leadership skills in a different capacity. And those conversations are always hard. I think the other piece that comes to mind for me is because I was an entry-level hall director type position at 2 different institutions, I had my people. I still talk and have good relationships with, the 2 people that I was very close to in both of those roles. As you move up through housing, the number of people who are in your position, it shrinks very fast. And so for me, it was figuring out who are those people in similar positions at other institutions that are folks who can be my sounding board. And for me, it's been really helpful that some of that is naturally built in within the Big Ten, but I often find myself emailing my Big Ten colleagues or saying, hey, can I talk to you for a moment, just be able to process situations, because it's not appropriate to be having some of those conversations with my direct reports, who are the people that I spend the most time with. And frankly, sometimes you just don't want to have those conversations with your supervisor. You need to be able to process it out with someone else.
My response is very similar to what others have said. I think what was most surprising to me in this role is the autonomy I have in my job, and the extent to which I'm sort of viewed as the expert. And it's kind of true. There's no one else at Augustana who understands housing and res life as well as I do. And I keep getting reminders of that when I look around and expect other people to have the answer, to understand what to do in a particular situation, and realize everybody's looking at me to make the decision. So I feel like every job I've had up until this point was really training for this. One example right now is the census. No one else at Augie knows how to handle group quarters census, and the census people don't really know how to handle a college. And I'm realizing now I'm going to have to make some decisions about how we're going to best work with the Census Bureau to complete the 2020 census for our students. And I have moments like that every week where I look around and expect there to be other people or other experts or other authorities, and there aren't. I just need to make a decision and do things here.
Yeah, good. Those are great answers. I think this idea that you're the content expert and being sort of thrust into that when you take an SHO position. I mean, I think that's the best case scenario, right? Is that you're on a campus, you're in a place where people value your experience and what you're bringing to the table. And in some ways that's scary because you might not actually feel like you're an expert, but in many ways it's freeing to be able to make the decisions that you want to make. And I forget which one of you said it, but someone said also that, like, I feel like I've been training for this my entire career. And I mean, in the best case scenario, your entry-level position, your graduate assistantships, all the things that you did in the mid-level do prepare you to move into a senior housing officer's position. So thanks for the answers to that, everyone. I think what we're going to do at this time, I have this question, what advice do you have? But what I'm going to ask you panelists to do is just keep this in mind as we're going to do wrap-ups. But what I'd like to do right now is pause and take questions from the audience. So Jeremy, if you're ready, if you could pose any audience questions. Again, I can't see them. Maybe there aren't any. I think there are probably some. So I'll pause and we'll move here to questions from the audience.
We had one that was, could you speak to how maternity/paternity leave impacted your work?
Well, everybody's had kids, so let's go with Jasmine and Chris.
Yeah. So mine is really fascinating. When I started Michigan as an associate director, a couple months later, surprise, baby number 1 was on the way. So I had not banked time at Michigan in order to have a full leave. And so one of the pieces for me that I always encourage people is, like, you have to figure out what works for you, and to be able to have some open and honest conversations with your supervisor and your reporting upline around what you want that leave to look like. I was someone who was able to, they allow me to kind of like bank time and do some works over our winter break days that just allowed me to have a different type of leave. My second child was born, and when I came back from leave is when we had a reorg that happened that I became a director in. And again, for me, with both of my leaves, it was really having conversations, or I was already in a director role, when I went out with my second child. And so it was really about having conversations around what is going to work for me, and to be able to navigate that with the department around what I wanted my leave to look like.
Yeah, I'll share one story from my own experience. One of my job transitions happened when my wife was 7 months pregnant, which I wouldn't recommend to anyone, and we're still married, fortunately. But similar to Jasmine, going into a new institution, I didn't have any leave time banked. So when it got to the point that I had the job offer, and that was something I asked about, something I negotiated for, is if they would be prepared to grant me some leave time, even though that wasn't the standard offer, that wasn't the policy, knowing that we had a child that was going to be born very soon. And they were. I didn't know that until I had asked, but I discovered that was something that could be negotiated for. And the other thing I'll share is, when you're going to be taking extended time off of work, it's really just a matter of making some decisions about what tasks can be delegated and being okay with some things just not getting done. And every time I've had to make those decisions that, okay, for the next, however many weeks, this just isn't going to happen, and that's going to be okay. The college won't, fall apart without me doing this. But if there are critical things, plan ahead and get those lined up and figure out who it is that's going to cover while you're out.
Great. Anything to add, Liz and Amanda?
I just would say, this is Liz, if you get it, to enjoy every single second of it. The world keeps spinning. If I could go, my first mat leave, I was a scared, terrified new mom. I was still a hall director, and we were living on campus in an apartment, and spent a lot of the time really rattled and trying to transition. And the second time, I missed move-in day. I was in my robe for 2 months. It was great. I really, really learned to use that time to the best of my advantage. So, and that time being, to bond with my baby, to help our family move into this new chapter. I mean, doing like the most important work I'll ever do. So, and I think considering it through that lens for myself, then shifted the way that I supervised. Because then I did, towards my last few months at OSU, had several hall directors who went out on their first time doing a mat leave. So just really trying to offer them really gracious and patient energy as they kind of navigate the FMLA process, and who's doing what while they're out, and just knowing that time flies, and the work will always be there.
Good. Anything to add, Amanda?
Sorry.
No, well, okay, we can go to the next one. Go ahead, Jeremy, thank you.
What if you believe that you are the expert, but others don't believe that, even if you're the only res life person?
So I will chime in on this one as my colleagues are thinking of their answers. The Akuho'ai office is a great resource for getting data and information related to what everyone else is doing. So I don't perceive on my campus that people don't think I'm an expert, but it is always helpful to have data, whether that's benchmarking data or actual research of what other people are doing, so that the communication that I have is supported by something other than just me or my experience. So the Akuho'ai National Office our International Office has a librarian. Her name is Emily Glenn. She's terrific. So shout out to Emily. But if you just email emily@akuho'ai.org with whatever question you have or whatever topic you're doing, she'll pull information from the Akuho'ai library that can support or give you information about whatever you're trying to do on your campus. So sometimes it just is helpful to have other folks chime in on what you're trying to do, and that builds your credibility as a professional on your campus. Other responses?
And one of the answers that one of the things that I'd noted somewhere else was that I think that housing is always under the microscope. And so I would answer that by saying I think everyone is an expert from their own lens. And I completely agree with what Vika was saying around, like, how do we find information from different data sources. I also think that it is a matter of listening to other people's perspective, because it may change or inform our decisions, and that's okay. As I think about my staff, they are legitimately, our entry-level staff are experts in what is happening in their own community. And there still will be decisions that are made that they may not agree with, because other people, other offices, other relationships are informing those decisions. So I think it is a matter of, when you move into a senior housing role, looking at big picture and knowing that decisions and perspectives may shift based on a variety of data sources that may be informing a decision that needs to be made.
I think each of us has a responsibility to stay educated about kind of our context. You know, and that might mean the context of the profession. Jasmine said earlier how she stays in touch with her Big Ten colleagues, and likewise, there's a group of Res Life directors at small private colleges in Illinois and Iowa, and we've got an email thread that we're always checking in with each other. So I feel like in some regards I really do know more than others, because there isn't anyone else on campus who knows what's happening in Res Life at Luther College and Coe College and Gustavus and Knox and some of our peer institutions. I also try to stay really cognizant of our Rock Island community, what the local housing market is like and our situation and, you know, rental situation and landlords, because that, depending on your housing policies and your residency requirements, you have to be kind of clued into your local context and kind of understand what students are experiencing, if they have options to live on or live off, or what that's all about. And I like to think that I'm a little bit more connected there than other folks on campus. So, you know, stay connected. And also in terms of gathering information, other information I gather is my own. Like I really keep track of a lot of numbers, and I keep track of numbers over time. That way I can kind of quickly answer questions if, you know, for instance, conduct is trending up or trending down, or alcohol or marijuana use, you know, how things are trending, or how our, you know, our occupancy numbers are trending, or room changes, or things that I can use to be able to provide insights to colleagues outside of our department that sort of show that I do know what's going on here, and I'm attentive, and I do have some expertise with, you know, student housing on our campus.
Jeremy, you want to throw out another one?
Yes, we have 3 more questions, but 2 of them have similar themes. We have a person who currently serves as assistant director, and their position does not include supervision responsibilities. What experiences should they look at to help them move up and develop experiences, skills to help them move into a senior level position? And the other one that's very similar is recommendations for professional development for people looking to make the jump to a CHO.
When I saw this question, a couple of things that I would recommend is, one, pull down the QI professional standards and competencies and just see where you fall in that. Do that self-assessment and then kind of build a professional development plan around that. And a professional development plan doesn't have to necessarily be directly related to your job responsibilities. So when I started thinking about moving into a senior housing officer position, I knew one of the areas as I moved up I would need some experience in was fundraising. And that wasn't something that my current job allowed me the opportunity to participate in. And so I went and went into the board of directors for a YMCA, where a huge part of that role is fundraising, because I wanted to learn a skill that I was a little bit not comfortable with. I also think another way, like you talked about supervision, not having direct supervision, get involved in a QI or GLOCUHO, in committee leadership or a task force. Because as you get involved in those opportunities and you have the opportunity to move up into a leadership role, well, it's not direct supervision. Some of the skills are similar, and so you can use that in interviews and in conversations. Committees on your department, on your campus, volunteer committees in your community, all of those sorts of things where you are setting an agenda, where you're holding people accountable. Those are the same sorts of supervisory skills that you would find in a job that you could speak to in a job interview setting.
Yeah, this is Liz. For me, I referred to earlier having had a professional development opportunity that I really identify as being the significant reason I was able to advance forward. And it was a committee experience. It was through my institution. It was when I had first was pregnant with my son, and I was moving away from serving on a board within the state of Ohio, and I wanted something that would require a little less travel. And I was hearing about an opportunity to serve on our staff advocacy committee, staff governance, our shared governance model at Ohio State. And first I started off as, a member of, 30 people just participating in that aspect, and then took on some more roles, and then eventually served as the chair of the committee. And that's where I learned to do, all of my policy work, which then transferred over to how to update a residential handbook, how to write a policy that would, advance an issue for our staff. It gave me the chance to learn how to do fundraising, which was just mentioned, how to interact with senior leaders. I learned a lot about executive presence through that experience, about how to show up in spaces where there's no one else that looks like me, there's no one else from student life, from residence life, and what I can do to contribute to that space. And also put me in a place of making really, really difficult decisions that I was going to be held very publicly accountable for. For example, in that position, we rescinded honorary degrees. And that was always, public knowledge once it was approved by our board of trustees. And I think just developing like the thick and skinned I knew I would need to stand next to those really difficult decisions, and to feel a little shaky but confident at the same time. And that was really important for me, feeling like I was ready and could talk to those skills and could transfer those skills over, to residence life and housing work. And I would always recommend to anybody to, if you don't have the chance to utilize a GLCUHO or an ACUHO-I committee, kind of consider what's on your own campus and how you might, make that a specific learning opportunity for yourself.
Great. Thanks. We'll try to squeeze in this last question, Jeremy. I think you said there was one more.
Yes.
And then we'll go to panelist wrap up.
What is the most important thing / area you have advocated for on the behalf of your entry-level or mid-level staff?
I can chime in here. Maybe one that's kind of recent is I've with all the FLSA changes, I've been working pretty hard to make sure that our live-in staff stay salaried. I hope that they feel like that's been a good thing for them, but it's kind of persuading higher ups and people outside of the department that that's a necessary move.
I had to last year make an argument for the continuation of our meal plans. People just didn't understand why some staff on campus were not receiving meal plans and others are, and how does that connect to the mission of our institution or in the work that we do as a residence life operation.
I would say earlier we talked about, being the residence life kind of expert on your campus, and I hired a new position, live on, and so that apartment was in desperate need of updating. And I realized that I was talking with folks who were not initially grasping that a person with their partner was going to be living in this unit year-round for multiple years, and why we needed to do some of the things that we were going to do that would look different than if we were doing them in a public space or in a common area for students. And advocating for, salary for that position, for technology access, and, and just really being patient, I think, with my colleagues who've been on my campus for many years, who maybe saw that position differently several years ago, and, trying to find really gracious ways to share with them ACUHO-I's, different recommendations around what our entry level and live-on professionals are doing. And, I think really thinking about how somebody's early years in the profession, how it impacts them for the long run was really important to me. And, so just doing that education, same thing, Becca, like you said, with the meal plan, just trying to help other people understand the nature of our work and why some of those differences are really critical.
Great. I'm going to transition us to the sort of candidate wrap up. So final thoughts that you all would like to share? Panelist wrap up.
So I've got some things I wrote down just in terms of advice. The one is develop good assessment habits, and even if that's as simple as keeping notes to your future self, because we do so many things that live on an annual cycle, and to remember, how did we run move-in day, how did we run housing selection and closing and CA selection, and just some of those big picture questions. I mean, if you can keep track of numbers, great, but even if you don't, just write notes to yourself and keep them in a place that you'll think and look back, so that way you can kind of improve your practice and keep getting better. I've learned that, being in a job now that I consider a long-term job versus a 3-year job, I find that's really important. Another piece of advice is find ways to stay connected with students, because as you advance in your career, you'll have less and less natural connection to students. So you have to kind of engineer that, and whether that's kind of creating for yourself an advisory committee or advising a group, like advising an RHA yourself, or attending student events, you got to maintain that connection. And 3, diversify your experience in whatever ways you can, whether that's serving at different institution types early in your career or looking for collateral assignments in other departments. I think the breadth on your resume will make you a competitive candidate as you try to advance.
This is Jasmine. I'll just share 2 things because I want to be respectful of time. One is that you are the chooser of what happens in your career, and so take some ownership and accountability for that. You don't necessarily have to follow a specific path, but it is what is going to be explainable for you. And the second is get comfortable asking for and accepting feedback. You don't have to agree with it, but as I think about my career, the difficult conversations that people have had with me came from a place of care, and they allowed me to be a better professional and to get to where I am today.
I would say that opportunity does not always knock. Sometimes you have to kick that door in. Use your mentorship to find those doors, believe in your talents, believe in your ability to do these roles, seek opportunities, and seek adventure.
I would say understand your why and always make your decisions based on that why. It's easy to get sidetracked. And then the other thing I would say is choose your team wisely, hire people that are better than you are, and then trust them to do the work that you've hired them to do. Trust them to do good work and that they are experts. You don't have to be an expert in everything. You just have to have good people around you. And I think that's critical. And build that team in all that you do.
Well, thank you so much, panelists, for spending time with us today, talking about your experiences and providing advice. I hope that the participants in this webinar have found it to be beneficial. I think it's important to note that sometimes housing and residence life gets classified as heavy male or heavy white or heavy single person or heavy no children. And I think this panel is a great representation of the diversity that exists in our field. And so if you're sitting someplace in an office wondering if there's space for you in a senior housing officer position, there's absolutely space for you. We are here, we are parents, we're women, we're people of color, we're here and we're needed on our campuses. We also have lots and lots of help. There's lots and lots of help. I talked a little bit about the Hawaii National Office. We heard that Liz spoke about mentors and Jasmine spoke about previous connections. And so you don't have to be an expert. You don't have to be the knower of all things in order to be in a senior level housing officer position. And so I encourage, if you're considering that step in your next career step, I want you to really consider that. As we wrap, just 2 more things. Nominations for the Mid-Level Institute hosted by GLACUHO will close on March 6th. You don't have to be nominated to participate, but I wanted to put that out there. The Mid-Level Institute applications are due March 13th, 2020. So please, if you're a mid-level manager, if you're a new mid-level manager, maybe you've been in it for a little bit, please, I encourage you to apply for the Mid-Level Institute. You can see that the trends deadline is coming up. GLACUHO leadership applications, those are due April 3rd. And then the conference call programs for the GLACUHO 2020 conference at the University of Illinois Springfield, those applications or call for programs is due June 6th. So thank you so much for participating today. Thank you to our panelists, again, for taking time out of their career out of their day, sorry, to talk about their career. We'd love to hear your thoughts at GLACUHO, so please feel free to complete this webinar assessment. And feel free to tweet us at GLACUHO regarding any additional questions that you have or commentary that you have about this session. Thank you so much for participating in the webinar. I'll turn it back over to Jeremy.
Please continue to fill out the assessment on screen. If you missed that, it will be emailed out to you in a couple of days. As well, if you have other professionals who weren't able to attend, a recording of this webinar will be hosted on our website. So feel free to share with anyone in your networks that you think would benefit from today's webinar. Again, thank you for all our panelists for taking time out of their schedules to speak with us, and continue the conversation at GLACUHO or shoot an email to any of the panelists. I'm certain they'll respond. Thank you so much, everyone.